First order of business actually is the reappointment of members. As you all remember, when the Hart was created 2 years ago, Borough Council staggered the term. The ordinance calls for not everybody to cycle on and off at the same time, so we have staggered terms. So last year, 2 of us were reappointed. This year, we have 3. Next year, we'll have the other 2 as terms will come up. So
You have 2-year terms, right?
they are 3-year terms. Yeah. But they were last this first go around.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we have, all 3, HARB members whose terms are coming up have agreed to serve again. So, I need to have a motion to have, the reappointment of 3 of our HARB members, Graham Copeland, Carl Dress, and Jennifer Bijewski-Hahn. So do we have a motion?
I so move.
Jim moves. Second. Okay, Kevin Block seconds. You all in favor of those reappointments?
Aye.
Okay, good. Now we can do things. Okay, and then the next order of business is our approval of our minutes from last month's meeting, our December 11th meeting. Kevin has circulated these. Well, he actually sent them to me. I circulated them to all of you. So I want to see if anyone has any comments or edits to them before we approve them. Nope.
Good.
Great minutes as usual. Kevin, thank you. So I have a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve.
Graham, and a second.
I'll second that.
Okay, Jim seconds. Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes from the December 11th meeting?
Aye.
Okay, good. So we have with us today, the development team for the 230 Haverford project. This is the first, official presentation to the HARB of this group. We've had some informal conversations over the past couple of years, I believe. But this is the first time with the submittal of their formal proposal that we'll be actually able to look at and begin to discuss the proposal in any kind of sort of detailed, cogent way. Just, as a way of introducing, the HARB is something that a lot of people have not come before in the past. This was, HARB was created by a borough ordinance a little over 2 years ago. Ordinance 1034 is the borough's historic preservation ordinance. And it created as an historic district, which basically is the entire borough. And it gives our scope of buildings constructed before 1945 that have retained their historic integrity. So that's our purview for the buildings that we're involved with. The ordinance is a very, very broad one, and its purpose and intent, very broadly speaking, is to preserve and protect the cultural, historical, and architectural fabric of the borough. And one of the other stated purposes is preserving the scale, streetscape, and overall character of the community. And in general, it promotes alterations to historic resources that are historically sensitive and that fit in with the character of the existing neighborhood. So, directly speaking, it's changes, architectural changes that fit in with the surrounding historic district. It's very much focused on surrounding areas. And the work that we do is actually to review and make recommendations to Borough Council for a certificate of appropriateness. And so we then, in doing so, we recommend that the borough either approve or not approve a certificate of appropriateness. What brings us into this particular discussion is the fact that there's an extensive amount of demolition of contributing buildings called for. So that's the entry point whereby we're asked to weigh in and participate in a process of approvals that has many other components within the borough as well. Planning commission, zoning, we have our zoning officer, also sits on the HARD. So we have a really nice overlap sort of informationally. Kevin Walsh both sits on the HARD and is actually it's our zoning officer as well. We also have, two members of the HARB that one is currently still on the planning commission and Jen was recently on the planning commission. So there's kind of a nice synergy, a nice overlap between these various bodies. So, you know, with that being said, our purpose tonight really is to allow you all to present your proposal, to be able to then entertain comments and questions from the rest of the HARB, as well as comments from anyone from the public who's attending as well. So, Tim, unless there's any other questions or any comments, I'll turn it over to you all.
Sure.
To present.
Should we project the images?
We can, yeah.
Yeah, it may be easier for people, but it's up to you.
Sure, so they're numbered.
Can I trouble you for an intro to your team?
Sure, so that's right. Most of these people are sick and tired of seeing my face around here.
No.
You have not seen this presentation yet. You may be the only one. Bob Careless, this year, he's the land development attorney, happens to also be a resident of the borough. And we've been working on projects now for probably 6 or 7 years at this point. Nancy Bastian, who has been to just about every other presentation from Cecil Baker, unfortunately came down with the flu, but we're lucky to have Aaron here, who is actually sort of the man behind the curtain that's done a lot of these renderings and images that we're going to present tonight. So in a way, in a twist of fate, it's probably almost better that Aaron's here because he's into he's in the trenches on this. And we had in prior presentations brought the engineering team, but didn't think it was necessary tonight. So what I thought I would do tonight, at the risk of being ultra repetitive for folks like Jim, who's probably heard this maybe 6 or 7 times at this point, is just do like a general introduction, top level, and then let Aaron, I'll pass the ball to Aaron and he can get into the details and actually present the drawings. Do you prefer that I stand up and do this?
However you're most comfortable is absolutely fine with us.
Well, since Aaron's going to talk us through the drawings, I don't even see the need to stand up.
Okay, that's fine.
I will just give you a little bit of backstory. First of all, we're at the about the 4-year milestone as it relates to this specific project. This thing had the unfortunate luck of starting literal months or even weeks before COVID hit. So we went into a hiatus. We had presented a plan and actually submitted a plan to the borough and then went into a cocoon for the better part of 18 months. When we came out, there were some different players, some different people, different visions. And this, what you're going to see tonight, by no means is finished product cast in stone. That is not the intent. However, I would say it is the culmination of the better part of 4 years of work and lots of input from people. We are very collaborative. We love to get feedback. We want people to be happy, but having said that, we're also very realistic that we're never going to please everyone. I can give you several examples very recently where, as it relates to, say, colors or materials, one person will have a very strong opinion about something, and then another person on that same board or maybe a different political body will have a completely polar opposite opinion. So it is a bit of a balancing act. And I just hope you appreciate that because it's hard to please everyone when it comes to subjective things like colors and materials and things like that. I would also say that, and Graham, I don't know if you know this, but I have a personal connection to Narberth. So as it relates to being understanding how the borough operates, understanding the rhythm, the character, the charm, all that. you're not dealing with folks, any of us that came in from out of town and just want to stamp a project out and move on. That's just not the case. And PS, just for what it's worth, of the universe of developers, there's probably a tiny, maybe in the single digits, that would spend a disproportionate amount of time and effort on something so relatively small. And that's the last point that I wanted to make, is because of where this is located, it's clearly high profile, without a doubt. Has an absolute impact on the borough. However, I do like to stress that relative to other projects, even other projects in the borough, like the Elm, it's not as big. Really, when you break it down, and I'm not going to steal your thunder, but I'm just going to say in a big picture sense, what we're talking about is a sort of a two-phase development. There's a bigger footprint that runs from what we'll refer to as Mapes to just short of the Get Cafe building, where the plaza that we propose would be situated. That's phase one. Phase one has 17 apartments above the street retail. It has approximately 12 or 13,000 feet of street retail. So when you compare it to other things that are out there in the world, it is just not a very large project. Phase two is even smaller, which is, as you'll hear, and as you probably are already aware, we propose to keep the Get building and then jump to the far side of it and do a very small building that would sort of be connected. And we'll get into details, but it would be connected, and that building would end up with, give or take, 4,000 feet of street retail and 4 apartments above it. 2 in the existing Get building, and then 2 ground up. So 17 units in the phase one, and then 4 in the other smaller phase. And things to think about before Aaron jumps in is that, as I alluded to earlier, this is not cast in stone by a long shot. Certain things we intentionally left out just because it's not fully evolved. And a specific example is how we design the entrance to all the future stores, the shops there. There's been concern that, there's not a lot of doors. We have this rhythm, this funk, these different storefronts, and you are going to come in with a monolith, which is absolutely not the case. The only reason we don't have doors and storefronts everywhere is primarily because we don't know yet at this stage who the tenants are, what that composition is, how big they'll be. And so we just made a decision to not show them. However, having been through a couple presentations and talked to Bob Careless, we may decide in the next February meeting to say, hey, what if? As long as people understand that we don't want that to be of record. Like, in other words, there are things that are going to move and change before the final approval. But to give people some comfort and relief that there's going to be more going on at street level, we're happy to do that.
Can I just interject along those lines? I'm wondering, again, thank you for bringing together such a strong team. We appreciate that, and we appreciate your collaborative approach to this development. I'm wondering, as landscape will become, as the design develops, will become more and more an element of the scaling of this project. You have CBP with us this evening.
Right.
Is there anyone from your landscape? Have you yet to really engage them? Where are we in terms of getting landscape on board?
Well, you want to answer?
We have a landscape architect on board. He just couldn't be here tonight. So it's Patrick Stewart from blanket on.
There are skills.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I'm on that probably. But yeah, we've had a landscape architect long engaged in this.
And that is a good example of one other thing that I left out, which is, again, going back to the collaborative nature of this project. There's lots of components, including really the overall general idea of like keeping certain buildings and raising others, that are the culmination of many meetings with different people in different capacities that represent the borough. Landscape is one of those areas where we're working together with the borough. There were questions about would we tie in landscape with potential landscape theme at Station Circle? The answer was sure. We're open to ideas. As it relates to landscape, the other question that came up, which I can address right now in case we forget, is do we plan on keeping the big mature trees? The answer was yes. Case in point is where Ricklands used to be located, 203. Haverford, right at Essex and Haverford, 203 Haverford has the big mature trees. And when you're up in those apartments, it's got a great vibe.
Yeah, and then I will go away for a while, but, just to set the tone, I think we do want to be clear that, we want to be responsive with an integrity to the comprehensive plan, with an integrity to our ordinance. There is some subjectivity involved, but there is at the core, there is an integrity to the best interests of the borough as a whole in terms of street tree development and, all of the things that we're trying to put forward, the green building and all of that, as part of the overview of, what we're looking for.
Yeah.
So, just to sort of,
All that goes in the mixing bowl. We've worked through this new green building ordinance. We're certainly working and open to adhering to the new language as it relates to bike racks and electric car chargers and all the other criteria. Landscape has been in discussion, so lots of it just goes into, as I refer to, the big mixing bowl, different people and opinions. But I think that's enough for now. I don't want to drag on. I think Aaron should just jump in and walk you through the specifics, maybe.
Sure. We were gonna start with just the plans, and elevations. Do any of you need, we can draw some 11 by 17s of the renderings and the plans? All set? Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
Here.
You want to start with the renderings first?
Could you start with the other set, the set number 2 with the, plans and elevations?
Sure. All right, let me look for this. Does anyone know how to find the thumb drive on insert?
Should be,
If you go up, shouldn't it be listed in the?
search files for it.
It's,
Probably down at the bottom, next to the window there. The left, all the way to the left.
Thanks.
In that window right next to
Strange
where the
version.
search bar is.
yeah,
That looks good.
there we go. Thank you.
That should be showing up on the left hand side.
Yeah, it's a lot. Number 2.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was gonna
No.
cue you up for that and I didn't have a chance
No,
to let you know. Let's start here.
And I will zoom out.
All right, so this is our site plan and just get you oriented here. The dark gray buildings are all existing to remain, and then the light gray or the white in the middle are the new proposed is the area to be developed. You see Haverford Avenue running east-west on the north side of the project, the train station to the west, and Narberth Avenue on the east with parking, existing parking, with minimal modification, behind the building. So what we're, planning to remove are typically, one-story, somewhat underutilized, retail. There is, we're keeping, as Tim mentioned, the Get Cafe. So what's being removed would be Mabe's American Family Market, and one story, and then from that point on, it's one story up to the Get Cafe. So what we're proposing is 3-story new construction from Mabe's up to the Get Cafe. That will, it's a mixed use project, so retail at the ground floor, it'll bring a little bit more vitality to the streetscape. And then next to the Get Cafe is also a new 3-story project. So with that being said, when we get to the elevations and the renderings, you'll see that we have various setbacks to help it fit into the context of the neighborhood, so that its mass is reduced. Oh, in addition, I can just point out that where there was a 4-foot walkway, you know, between Haverford Avenue to the parking, we're now proposing a plaza that would be connected to the one retail on the corner, and we'll see that in a lot more detail as we go to the next sheet. So here would be the ground floor. The demising walls in this retail are may likely change, as Tim pointed out, as well as the entries to the retail. But what we're confident of is this public plaza connects to Haverford Avenue and the retail on the corner. Go to the next slide.
The number of units could vary too, or do you think that would be likely the number of?
Yeah,
retail
we've been
units?
working with council on a specific concrete number of units, 29.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was thinking retail,
Oh, you're talking retail?
yeah,
Retail, it
completely.
should be determined, you know, case in point is 100 Forest, as you know, just leased very recently. Building was a good ways built before we secured a tenant. 203 Haverford has yet to be leased. We've had numerous prospects, but we just don't know whether it's going to be 2 tenants or 1 larger tenant. So all of that, as you can appreciate, given what your day job is sort of dictated by the size and the uses, the ultimate lease up of the commercial space. It would be very unwise to demise that and then hope that you get lucky. You know, you're limiting the universe of prospects at that point.
Sorry, I need to just send this Zoom meeting link to Kevin Walsh.
Sure. While you're doing that, I could just talk a little bit about the plaza, because the plaza was something that we thought was like a critical component to this project. It's costly in the sense that essentially in lieu of doing more street retail and more apartments above, we proposed to leave open space. But what we thought was, knowing, again, being familiar with the borough and people's preferences and just how the borough functions, there's always activity on the sidewalks. People love sidewalk seating. We thought to have a nice wide plaza area with string lights and art, you know, public art and seating, that it would activate the two. Yeah, I mean, you don't get lost in the specifics because it was brought up in the planning commission meeting. Well, I don't know if I think that people are going to use those particular tables and chairs. That's just Aaron's imagination the day that he created that rendering. There'll be public art there, there'll be seating. It'll allow us to set back the entrance to the apartments and not take up valuable frontage along Haverford. So it sets back in that plaza in between Haverford and the parking lot. it creates this nice, wide, inviting opportunity for folks to get from Haverford back to the lot without navigating that. You know, it's almost like a little mouse hole next to American Family Market right now. So I just thought that I'd take a moment to point that out because that part excites me. I really think that that's the kind of thing that day one, it's just going to feel good, and I think it's going to be utilized. It's not going to be one of these things that sounds great in concept or maybe looks good on a plan and doesn't get properly utilized. I think it's going to be a very popular area.
Yeah, actually, if you go back to the ground floor plan, you can see that we have the entry to the apartments off of that sort of the south side of that plaza and the connection between the parking.
Is there demolition involved with the creation of that open space?
There is the one story that's currently connected to the Get Cafe that is going to be demolished. And you'll see, we're proposing along the Get Cafe to add windows at that first floor and to enhance that elevation.
But the plaza is currently the easy phone repair shop. Literally, that's what it sits, and it's fastened right into the Get building. So that's where the plaza would exist.
Okay.
Aaron, could you just clarify where the demolition occurs? Maybe on the site plan, so.
Sure, you can go back to the site plan. Here. So demolition would be from basically from here to Get Cafe. So this is shown in white, but it is an existing building to remain. And then
Mainline ship is in there.
yeah, and then this as well. There's this existing drive we're keeping, and we're actually setting the new building back slightly from where it currently is. You'll see in the renderings, it's not shown in the site plan, but this strip here, we're planning on having planting up against that 250 to 252 Haverford new project.
And I know you mentioned this, Aaron, but just to reiterate, the way the lot will function post development or redevelopment will be exactly the way it functions now in terms of ingress, egress, layout. Essentially, it just stays the way it is.
The buildings on either side of Get Cafe would be demoed.
Right.
Okay, if you go to the second floor plan, there are 9 units proposed here, and as you'll see in the elevations from Haverford, that's where we start to step the building back and create, break down the mass of the buildings. You'll see the 2 large balconies on here, 2 large balconies on Haverford Ave side, as well as balconies on the south parking side. Here to the next. And then the third floor, we have set back at both adjacent to the existing 2-story at this end, as well as a large section in the middle. And that helps to tie it into the existing, adjacent 2-story buildings. And on this level,
How far is the setback from the facade?
The minimum is 6 feet, and we've gone further than that. I don't know that I have that dimension on here. So I think that's, I can't
So
give you
some of it's probably 6, and that corner is probably a little
that's
more.
closer to 10 or 11. And I think similarly when we get to the building adjacent to the Get Cafe, 250, 252, that also has a very deep setback, greater than the minimum required. You can go to the next slide. So here we're starting to show, or here we're showing the existing Get Cafe and the proposed adjacent. So currently, Get Cafe it has a stair and access from the existing 1-story at this side, as well as a metal stair in the back, which we're going to be able to remove, sort of an unsightly, almost like a fire stair back here. And the new entry will be adjacent to the retail. We'll set that back similar to some of the other existing storefronts that have residential above, so you kind of get your two entrances at the same location. So retail on the first floor with proposed new, retail on the existing. Getting up to the second level, we have the 2 units in the existing Get Cafe, and then the first floor of bi-level units in the proposed. So first floor up to the second floor. So these would have internal stairs, which aren't currently shown on this plan.
I'm a little confused on, the second floor plan of the big building
Mhm.
with the square footages relative to the number of bedrooms. I don't know if, I just don't get it, but on the back of the building, there are small units of 895 and 780 that say 2-bedroom.
Mhm.
And then a 1-bedroom of 1682 and a 2-bedroom of 1700 and 1800 and 1700. Are they really 2 bedrooms that are that small?
Oh, yeah. In, in 100 Forest and 203, we don't have a single unit that exceeds, or that gets to 1,000 feet. Everything is 900 down. Yeah, I mean, 900, 800 even is perfectly suitable for a 2-bedroom. What you're seeing there and what causes the confusion is that some of these units are disproportionately large. Like a big unit in my world would be 1,000 feet, and there's
Yeah.
quite a few extremely big units here, but that has more to do with the combination of the hard cap on the number of units that we want to do in cooperation with Borough Council. And also, and equally important, because keep in mind, all of this is at my risk. I mean, you can draw it on paper, but it has to work, or else I'm the one that finances it and has trouble if I can't lease it. But the interesting thing about Narberth, and I think I pointed this out in the Planning Commission meeting, is ordinarily you see a demographic that consists of young professionals and empty nesters, sort of equal distribution, but in Narberth, it skews much more towards empty nesters. And what we've learned from other properties in the immediate vicinity is that you're dealing with a lot of folks that are selling their bigger homes wherever it may be. It could be Narberth, but it could be Wynwood, it could be anywhere close by. And they actually, there's almost insatiable demand for these larger units. There's like multi-year waiting lists because they have a lot of stuff. And they have super strong balance sheet, lots of liquidity, sold homes that are presumably worth millions of dollars, and they'd rather have a 1,500-foot unit, and they're not so concerned about how that equate, what does that mean in terms of a monthly rent. That's somewhat unique to other areas where we've done these things, but it is reality. So I feel I have every confidence. It was just a happy accident in the sense that council didn't want to have too many units, and in this particular demographic, it actually works. And in fact, I am pretty confident that with the deep corner terraces and the balconies, and knowing what those views are out of 203 and 100 along Haverford, the treetops, the stores, it's like Norman Rockwell, there's going to be a lot of demand for that stuff. But that's what's throwing you off. Those units that you're seeing are big. 800-900 square feet would be more typical for 2-bedroom.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, can I move on? So here, these elevations are rather small on the screen, but in this elevation, we have showing the existing context to the west. And you can see how what we're doing with our building and the setbacks is, working with, creating sort of these 2-story elements with the 3-story setback. We are also varying cornice heights. So where we have masonry, it's, it steps up and is a bit taller than where there's the metal panel, which we'll see in the renderings. We're using both awnings and signboard. Typically the signboard is referencing some of the, older style, wood, elements. And those are signifying the entries, to the stores. Moving up,
Oops,
no, that's okay. I was just gonna mention, here you can see adjacent to the Get Cafe, similarly, we, step the building, set it back, where it is adjacent to a shorter two-story building. So yeah, I mean, try to break down the elevation, to give it a little bit more, playfulness.
Could you comment on the mansard element at the roof level? The addition of the windows at the mansard type?
Yeah, similarly, I mean, that's a method to, insinuate a two-story building, where, when you still have a three-story portion to it. So it helps, reduce the overall feeling and reduce the overall appearance of the height of that.
And the other thing it does, is, a lot of the feedback we got is we folks want to see different design elements and they don't want it to ever seem like it's necessarily even part of the same project. Break it up, do different things. There's been a lot of feedback, both positive. The mansard's another perfect example of a lightning rod where some people love it on the planning commission. Pulled me aside, said absolutely love it. It's whimsical, fits right in. It's playful, and other people don't. We'll never please everyone on that because, like I said, without naming names, there's a lot of people that love it, and I think it's on public record who doesn't like it. So.
We'll comment later or?
Yeah, I was gonna let him get through his whole, and then we'll go around and.
Yeah, I'll try to get to the rendering soon because they're a little more illustrative.
Yeah.
The project, since these are so small. Just a few other architectural elements that we have included. And now you'll see them in the renderings, but at the brick elements, we have some projecting cast stone cornice as well as cast stone sills to create some of that shadow line. On the Get Cafe, which is on the next sheet, you'll see the wall section. Go to the next. We've also introduced some corbelling, and in addition to sort of get a little bit more articulation to the facade, we have areas where we've recessed the brick slightly. That would be on the previous. So you can see it here. So there's a slight recess with the corbelling, and then on the previous sheet in the elevation.
Corbelling, the
I'm sorry.
brickwork.
Yeah, that's when you stuff the brick. Let's go to
Stepping it back. From top to bottom.
Yeah, if you go back one more, so I have to remember what point this overall elevation. Yeah, so along here, and you also see this in the renderings, there are certain areas where we've stepped back the brick slightly to just play around with the the articulation of the facade. This location as well, and we've also used two different tones of brick. So I think we could probably move on to the rendering presentation. I will just mention before we get into the renderings that, as I think some folks already know, we've gotten some feedback on previous iterations of this, and taken those comments into consideration with this current design.
And then subsequent to that, we got a lot more comments from last week's meeting, which we have not had time to really address or deal with quite yet.
Right. So this first rendering is from Haverford Avenue, looking towards that courtyard, public courtyard, right adjacent to the retail. I think that'll be a great active space between Get Cafe and this new project. So previously, we had thought that having the balconies at the corners would, be the ideal approach. And some of the feedback we got was that, some folks thought that it would be better to have more of a presence and a mass at this corner, to demarcate like the entrance to this plaza and this public space. So we shifted around the location of that balcony, and so, this is the result of that. We also reduced the amount of glazing that we had near the elevator lobby. So I think that, and then additionally, we have the lighter brick tone was a result of some of the comments we got about the elevation feeling a little bit, because it is the north side, it's going to be in shadow quite a bit at the time, that it would be better to sort of have a lighter feeling to it. So we've gone with a blended brick, primarily a lighter tone, and you'll see in some of the other ones, we also have another brick that is contrasting that slightly. It's a darker blended brick. Here you can see the cast stone sills giving some creating some shadow lines, and then the recessed brick in the corners to sort of enhance this window opening, pull the windows apart. To just give that a little bit more interest as well, and to see the signage bands and some of the play that we've done down this streetscape. It's very nice just looking down through the plaza. And here you can start to see the relationship of some of the two-story elements to what we're doing, and how we drop down this or set back, I should say, the third story here, and then the mansard to sort of give this the feel of a two-story building. And so this is the three-story adjacent to cafe. I talked about this entry and how we've set the building back further from where the existing is, to create a planting strip between the drive and that building. And then you can see the corbelling and the recessed brick. This is just a view from across the street of the entire project. Similar to the first view we looked at.
This is a good spot. Just my earlier point about this not being a fully formed idea. I mean, we fooled around with ideas about art, like mural, partial mural, mosaic, different things that are going to occur here that really activate it and introduce art to this area. This was just a rendering. So where we didn't know what we were going to do, it's sort of left blank, but the ultimate outcome there is going to be a lot different than what you see in that rendering.
Right, and we have added windows to the first floor of the Get Cafe, whereas there was previously the one-story building attached to that, and then these openings should mimic what's existing above.
You removed some window fenestration from that wall there that is now the three-story blank wall.
Is the elevator shaft, wasn't it?
The elevator.
No, we just actually, the comment was also, that somebody felt that the plaza was too small. And so we actually shifted, instead of it being, I think it came out and over previously. So we gave more space to the plaza and reduced the amount of lobby space that was there.
Yeah, Graham, there was an earlier version that had in that sort of monolithic, it was closer to the street, and it was all windows, and that was the elevator lobby. So that's what they changed.
Right.
And then you can see where there's windows just to that, so they kind of moved back and over that elevator lobby.
To capture more plaza space.
Yeah, just to set it back, capture more plaza, and then just aesthetically, there was some pushback on that much glazing and just the look of the lobby, the stacked lobby. And like I said, I think if you can imagine mural or something really unusual and cool that fits into the vibe of an arbor, all of a sudden from a white monolith, it becomes something that's like attractive, like a central feature in a way. This is literally, I would say, more or less a placeholder in terms of the look of it. Canvas, blank canvas.
All right, if you can move on to the next. Just a street view, give you a feel of, what the Get Cafe and the entrance and how we've taken into account some of the other entries to storefront and residential.
Aaron, can I jump in one second while we're on this? There was one other thing that I should mention that's important in terms of putting things in proper context. There are any combination of rumors or just misunderstandings about maybe the type of retail tenant that we're talking about. There were, at least at one point in time, concerns that it was going to be like more of a national ilk, Starbucks, things like that. And also just maybe folks not being as familiar as we are with the details of the plan, this notion that it's just a big project. The reality is that we're decommissioning about 12,000 feet of what is commercial space now. So whatever Norfolk has now as part of this project in the Little Gym building, at the end of the project, we'll have 12,000 square feet less of commercial. The bulk of that is the Little Gym building, which is 8,000 feet of commercial. But the plaza area and other areas, just when all said and done, the net result is that when you get done with moving existing tenants around the streetscape that want to stay, examples would be like Get and Shift. You're not talking about much more than 6,000 or 7,000 feet of space. So you're talking about, the feedback that we've received is strong, like robust demand for food and food related uses. So you're talking about 2 or 3 food uses, or maybe, a couple food uses and one other retail tenant. This is not an enormous project.
We can go into the next one, which probably. So this is a view from the west. It's again trying to coordinate with existing context, having our setbacks relative to existing 2-story.
Awning colors, materials along those storefronts, all going to change for sure. Tenants are going to come in, they're going to want to have create a storefront with materials and a palette that's on brand with whatever their business is. So this is, again, just our best shot to draw a pretty picture in a sense and give you some sense of what it could look like, but it will certainly change.
One other thing to point out was, previously we had shown a darker material for sort of the setback and the 3-story portion. And once again, trying to keep this fairly light on the north side. So now we have metal panel there. And there was a concern about the material that we were presenting before as well.
Where's the metal panel?
It's all in the setback areas and at the 3rd floor. In some instances, it makes its way down to break up help break up the facade.
I'm just letting everyone know Kevin Walsh is calling on my phone to listen in. He's having some Zoom trouble. Kevin, can you hear us? Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then I think you can go to the last one, which is similar to the first, but I think I will turn it over.
Yeah. Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah.
He's on my phone. He's with us. But
Okay, great. All right, so, we asked some questions, made some comments along the way, but I wanted to throw it open to everybody for more sort of detailed or some more specific things. Jan, can we start with you?
Sure. I guess, having just stepped down from planning commission, I have to sort of filter my comments to just curb. And there are a couple of things that, a couple of questions. One, I think that this project is coming along and the plaza idea is generous. I think it's a nice offering to the civic life of Narberth. And I do see that as a place where people will gather, where you could, show movies or artwork or whatever. Typically, having an elevator shaft that is an elevator shaft that goes up 3 stories, right? Having an elevator shaft at the exterior wall is, usually you tuck it inside the building to optimize opportunities for daylight. But I don't want to get off track.
Let me just address that one thing though, that's primarily a stacked lobby. Like in other words, there is an elevator component in there, but the first iteration of this plan, everything that you think is a shaft had glass. It was a lobby area.
Yeah.
So I just want you to know that the feedback we got was do away with the glass and
Really?
yeah, so that's not a big elevator shaft standing. That's literally just stacked lobby with no windows in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Part of, the daylight optimization goal is to maximize windows at the exterior walls and to, CVP knows this, and to put all of your machinery at the center. But if you were directed otherwise, then hands off. The mansard roof piece is one that I cannot get past. The mansard roof is embedded in the history of zoning for a time when buildings were only allowed to be 2 stories. And so a window was added to the attic space, sort of under the radar, as a way to occupy the space off the record. So in a way, thinking about it, I'm thinking to myself, oh, a mansard roof. We're really only supposed to have 2 stories here on this side of the street. We're giving 3 stories because of you're meeting the green building practices. So we're like reinterpreting the mansard roof for our new re-envisioned purpose of a 3rd floor, which is green building, which never existed before. I don't have a problem necessarily with the mansard, but I have a problem with its abrupt termination at a metal roof that is a wall, or at a metal wall that is not a roof, or whatever that juxtaposition of materials is. I think either you have to take that mansard roof further, or it's just not going to work. It looks unfinished. And I know, Tim, based on everything you've said, that this is unfinished and in process. But that is just a sticking point for me, that mansard. It just doesn't seem to do justice to the historical, appearance of a mansard roof. When we look at that, we know what it is. So why is it here now? I think it needs to be more intentional and given greater focus in the design. Is my opening comment.
A little bit of Paris right here in Narberth.
We're French name.
Yeah, well,
I'm a hockey fan.
Well, I think that, it's interesting, Aaron, having you talk about sort of the intent of trying to make a 3-story building kind of look more like a 2-story building, but I don't think it works. I don't think it's successful, because you have 2-story buildings on either side of it. So we've got a really good frame of reference of what a 2-story building looks like. And so if anything, it calls more attention to the fact that it's not a 2-story building. So I think kind of rethinking that, it would be a good idea. I mean, we're already kind of further down the road in terms of the Harv's comments. I mean, our first order of business really is to discuss that demolition. That, basically you're going to be demolishing a good amount of the south side of Haverford Avenue. These are historic buildings, they're very modest buildings, but that's a side of the street that, in terms of its context and its visual, its appearance and its reality, has not essentially changed since 1910. And it did not develop in the 1920s the way the opposite side of the street did for its own reasons. It was a very utilitarian side of the street. It was where you bought building supplies. There was a side track where coal was dumped behind. I mean, so it functioned in Narberth in a very different way. And they're much smaller scale buildings there. Now it creates some problems in terms of preservation, because you don't have sort of nicely designed architectural features to be able to sort of point to, but that's the nature of this particular type of building. So it's a very, very problematic, it's a very, very problematic thing. On the plus side, all the buildings that are part of your projects, everything that you're proposing for demolition, they are all one-story buildings that at one time had storefronts of their particular areas, and at this point, there really isn't much there. If those had been 2 or 3-story buildings, there'd be a lot more design element to be working with, So at this point, I think really American Family Market is the only one that looks pretty much the way it did. It started out as an automobile garage and became a variety store in the 19-teens. So it served as a store the whole time. So the problem that we run into is these are very simple, humble buildings, but that's the buildings that we have here. So I think sort of the first order of the business of the harm is really going to be, not necessarily this evening, but coming out and just sort of have a discussion of that, and also then moving forward from that, if we feel we could recommend demolition to the Borough Council, then the next thing that comes into bearing is what's going to be built and what's the nature of it. How does it relate to that historic district? The historic district being the opposite side of the street, and we have a very small historic district, so commercial district. So we've got a pretty good fix on what that is. And that's going to get into the material. It's also going to get into, we talked a little bit about the sort of synergy there is, or the sort of commonality between what the Planning Commission is tasked with and what we're tasked with. And I think one of the things that we'd like to be able to do ultimately over this period of time moving forward is to try to have to be able to speak in a more unified voice. So you've got a consistent, unified thing to build from, so that you're not saying, some people love the Mansard and some people hate it. I think there needs to be sort of a much clearer picture for you of how you should be moving forward. Because one of the sort of conditional use requirements are very similar in terminology to what our mandate is in terms of ensuring that it's an appropriate scale, massing, with building materials. Well, that's part of the conditional use too. So it's just said in a different way. So I think there's going to be a lot of potential for us to work in collaboration with the Planning Commission. And when we go around and talk more, I'll invite Todd with us and invite him to comment on that as well. But I think those are the things. Those are sort of our initial charges as a harm. Anyway, I'll sort of throw it over to anybody else who would like to make it. I hadn't really intended to sort of jump in, but I kind of felt at this juncture we need to kind of drop back and sort of center a little bit more on what the harm's role is. So, yeah.
Can I add something to that? I would just add that, when the Historic District Ordinance was created, there was a deliberation about, whether it would start from 1945 or 1960 something. And it was decided 1945 would be the start date for anything built 1945 and prior would fall under the Historic District Ordinance. And the reasoning behind that is because of the train station essentially being at the center of the community. And that was sort of one of the generating elements of the development of Narberth, was that it had a train station at the center. So I think part of the integrity of what we have to bear in mind here is that the district ordinance does acknowledge that as being essential and even central to the development over time in Narberth. And Dennis knows more about this than me, but I think it's an important thing to keep in mind, in particular, as we look at the, what is given to parking, which is adjacent to that train station. I haven't resolved that in my mind. I know that that's something that you're probably counting and taking into careful account. But I do think that it's an opportunity to perhaps further think about and, sort of maybe acknowledge to some degree pedestrian aspects of, commuters using the train, how to create corridors, green corridors for people walking, for people playing on the weekends. I know that, families, I've said this several times now, but when we have our music and art festivals, the children and the parents and everybody, especially when McShay's was there, would just congregate on the south side of the building because there's so much sunlight. And they would find some shade and the kids would play, and we were always like, wrangling them away from the cars that were moving around. Delineating pedestrian and parking, I think, will be essential to activating that space, not only, behind those buildings as well as in front of those buildings.
Just one comment, Dennis, probably all of it at this point. Two different things, you sort of have to pull them apart. One is like your job, and the lens that you take you look through. And the other one is like, call it businesses and retail leasing and that aspect, the community, the vibrancy of the businesses, the synergy. What we tried to do, and not claiming that we're perfect, but what we tried to do, and I mentioned in a couple prior meetings, was look at the area as a whole and pick off some buildings that we thought had some true like character, some charm, some uniqueness. The Revival building, which we haven't talked about tonight because it's not part of the application, the Little Gym building, the Get building, we've certainly talked about, and then sort of bifurcate. And look, you made a comment, you yourself made a comment at one of the earlier meetings about, look, you're not looking to preserve things in amber.
Right.
Like there's two different, you're at a fork in the road. And the reality is that we wanted to preserve certain things, and we certainly didn't want to rock or disrupt the rhythm and the character of the borough. But we did obviously want to change some things. Debatable whether you see that change as good, positive, or bad. But we're at that fork in the road. What I know can occur in some change is you can bring in some new blood, some new businesses, and not only provide amenities, additional amenities to the community, but they would presumably be like cool businesses, things that people would enjoy patronizing in one way or another. And they would also, the existing businesses could draft off of those businesses and sort of create a snowball effect, as we know, because I've said this many times, this is by no means, this type of project, street retail and apartments above, is probably 20-year plus trend. I mean, I spent in the 90s, we were doing these main streets in 21 different states in my old job, trying to sort of recreate fraudulently what Narberth has inherently, but it works. I mean, the reason that people spend tens or hundreds of millions or whatever is because when you bring those residents, in this case, just round it to 30 units and say it's 60 people for argument's sake, those are 60 people that have a lifestyle of, I want to walk out of my building and I want to buy a pastry and, hang out at Get. Like if they didn't want that, they would move somewhere else. We're also screening these people because it is a TOD, which is another thing that people have tried to sort of, in some cases, fake their way through, but this is legitimate TOD. This is something where people can rely on bikes and trains and things like that and just be part of this. Eat, work, live. It's a beaten down buzzword that's probably 30 years old at this point, but it works. So I would only say that, change, like I've said before, a lot of times people push back on it because the fear. It's not so much the change, it's like the unknown. And a lot of times, I don't know what the percentage is, when it's done, people are like, this works. It's the fear, the unknown. I, for one, think that you should just give consideration to, what I'm saying, where like if you decide you want to preserve in amber that one-story stuff, you are very much limiting the way retail operates now. It's and I'm sure Graham's sort of in this world as a broker. There's just not as many folks out there. There's not as many players as there used to be. There's a fraction of them, and you got to give them a reason to come. And they want column free. They want height. They want to be part of a community like this with these demographics. We have that in spades. But to think that we're going to get those types of cool uses with basements that flood every time it rains and narrow, a lot of columns, low ceilings, these are things that are going to preclude us from a lot of that pool. So it would be cool, unbiased, to have your cake and eat it, have some of those types of tenants and keep some of the stuff. I just wanted everyone to be aware of that, because if you're going to make a decision, you should be informed. And that's just a consideration.
Yeah, I think we are informed, but I think that when I stated a long time ago that preservation is not about preserving something in the amber, it's about wise use. And it's about context, and it's about being sensitive to the context. I was outlining sort of what our charge is as a HARD. Sort of what the first order of business is to talk about the existing buildings and come to a feeling about how we feel about it. I mean, Narberth has always changed, and I think it's sort of it's unfair to sort of pillory preservation by saying, oh, these people just they're afraid of change. It's not that way at all. I mean, but it is about making sure that you've got an eye on change and that you're trying to do it in a wise way that really is compatible in scale and in feeling with the rest of your historic district. And I think that I think you're on the way there, and I think I think you're going to get there. I don't think we're there yet, but you said that yourself when we first sat out. So, but I think that this is something that we're going to have to really look at. And I think a lot of the comments from the planning commission meeting the other day, I think revolved around that as well. But Narberth has always changed. Narberth started out as a purely residential city, town. And it was, by the first decade of the 20th century, it began having an interest in having a civic core, and the YMCA building gets built, the arcade building, which part of it burned, that formed at that time too. So there was already a civic and commercial push in this area. Had it not been for that, we would have been like Marion or any other sort of station that never had a commercial core. And I think that's part of the, what people really like and why Narberth is as valuable a place as it is because it has that. We're not for a commercial district that actually, in the 1920s really developed. We wouldn't be talking about Narberth the way we are right now. I mean, some of those houses, they existed for 30 years before they were taken down for commercial uses. So change is really part of that. So I mean, it's not that we're opposed to change, but we want to make sure that we don't kind of, throw the baby away with the bath, where they really make sure that that what gets built supports the character of Narberth and doesn't fight with it. And I think one of the things we've said all along, and other people have said, is this isn't Phoenixville. We don't want to be Phoenixville. We want to have that be on people's mind all the time. And it's about scale. It's about the materials that are used. It's about how buildings are detailed. I mean, that's all the kind of stuff that I think this is, that this conversation moving forward really needs to be about. And, it ties in well with the other conversations. There's, you have a lot of zoning, there's the Saldo issues, all of this stuff. But I think that, at least this is the way we have to be looking at it. This is the way we want to be looking at it. So anyway, I think this is a nice opportunity to get those thoughts out, and also to kind of, try to drive a state through the heart of the nation that we're opposed to things changing. you know, we're about conservation, so we're about wise use, we're not about stopping. So,
I think everybody understands what you're up against, building
Yeah.
a economically viable, rebuild an economically financially viable place here. Where I think everyone in this group and in the planning commission is 100% sympathetic to that. So we're not gonna try to influence this project to be Williamsburg or some crazy thing like that. But we want what you build to be a good neighbor to the stuff that's across the street. And what's currently drawn isn't from an architectural standpoint. It is wholly different. And I think we've used the word scale a lot. It's the wrong scale. I went on and on and on Wednesday about this, and I promised myself I wouldn't do that tonight. But I think we need to look more analytically at what's on the north side of Haverford Avenue and ask ourselves the question, is what's on the south side a good neighbor across the street? What do we have to do to the elevations on the south side of the street to make it feel sympathetic to what's on the north side of the street without slavishly replicating, you know, the doorknobs and the,
right.
and that boils down, in my mind, to scale. And there's a scale problem. Like I said on Wednesday, there are a number of things. The elevations, unfortunately, convey a scaleless, first floor strip of, and I understand you don't know where the doors are, but maybe the way to counter that is to build a facade that has, other than a continuous band of storefront, undifferentiated at present, because you don't know where the tenants, where the demising partitions are going to be, where the doors are going to be, that has a rhythm that allows the doors to be pretty much any place. And maybe it's not just a whole bunch of aluminum mullions marching down the street. That's deadly, deadly. You know, we can, that's what happens in spec retail, you know, like Greenfield Avenue in Ardmore. Just awful to walk down that street. I think everyone would agree.
So what would you do?
What I would
Differentiate from
do-
one to the next with some material between the glass?
Yeah, I would not have a continuous band of storefront. I would have a continuous rhythm of masonry. And I would create the ins and outs, like Mapes. Let's look at old Mapes. They had 3 doors in Mapes, right? Only one of which was actually a door. 2 of them were used for storing trash cans and rolls of chicken wire and other bulky.
The seasonal things they were.
Seasonal things, yeah.
Yeah.
No shovel. But the point was, they had originally been doors.
In and out.
And there was an in and out. And by the way, the in and out gives you a place to fold your umbrella, which is a nice welcoming gesture to any building. And if you took that approach to the commercial strip, commercial facade, you'd solve the problem ultimately of where to put your unknown tenant's door when the time, it would just be one of those alcoves. And I know as an architect myself, I know that would have a benefit in terms of curing the problem that we're currently uncomfortable with of that unremitting.
Those storefronts that originally functioned, there was different storefronts for different businesses.
Because they're
Mapes properties, Mapes came and unified them all, and they used them all as a unified property. So that's why you have those storefronts coming in, those 1920s storefronts that went in.
You mean the Mapes building now?
No,
That-
okay.
Okay.
That's the left-hand
I got
side, right,
I
that would have been Mapes. Mapes had 2 other
Right.
storefronts. So now,
They were literally assembled. They were 3 different properties that they put together.
Third walls.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. But now that Mapes is gone, I mean, you've acquired one, it wasn't renting, you've acquired, it doesn't become part of your project, but those other two became small businesses again. You know, so, and that was allowed to happen because those spaces could be reclaimed that way.
Right.
And I think that's the thing. And also too, I would say, just building off of what Jim was saying, really look at the opposite side of the street and look at how it works. And I know that you have looked at it, but I think that it's in sort of figuring out, okay, what's 2-story, what's 3-story, but really look at how that works on a street level, you know, and how you've got basically 4 buildings across the street. A lot of different storefronts, but it's really only 4 buildings, and each of those buildings has a particular design, particular character, but they all relate together. And you have, you know, a 3-story building on the corner that wraps around, but it's mostly 2-story buildings. Then you have the YMCA, you know. So I'm saying that, you know, just really kind of look at that for some cues, not to replicate it, you know, not to do the Waynesburg thing, but just to kind of see as a pedestrian, as a person on the street, how that space feels and how those buildings help to make a space feel a different way. And I understand what you're up against in terms of renting buildings. And I know that, you know, a lot of the discussion has been the view from the interior of the apartment outward, okay, which is completely valid. But I'm saying also think about the view of people in the historic district on the street looking in from where they are, you know, not only people looking out. I mean, and I think it's hard sometimes, but I mean, to have both of those happen at the same time. But I think from our standpoint, it's important that you do. So.
Yeah, and you know, we had started with some of that rhythm of the masonry piers and recessing the masonry sill where the storefront's located. So I don't think that we'll have a difficult time in addressing the rhythm and the articulation at the first floor.
I think that will get you to a much better place.
Can we turn to A05, sheet A05, just to take a closer look at some of those conditions at the storefront? A05, there, on the right, is it possible? The image number 1 on the right, showing doors. The diagonal is a bit, I don't think it helps the retail tenant. I think squaring off those windows gives traffic moving left to right and right to left both equal opportunity to see what's inside. It opens up the view. It, I think, works better with perhaps display shelves or tables or something more of a square nature. I feel like that really wants to be squared off. The diagonal thing causes a little bit of uncertainty in terms of who are we talking to here. I feel like it needs to be square to the street to fully.
Was its purpose to just show differentiation, just some variety of the lines?
Well, it was to essentially create an alcove for your entry to both retail and your residential, so we just didn't have the residential door, you know, smack up on the street. It's, you know, it's not mimicking, you know, what you have adjacent to the left and Get Cafe, but it was playing off that somewhat, where we were starting to, you know, rip off of those alcoves that are happening on the other side of the street as well as on this side.
It's under roof, right?
Yeah,
That's what that line
the
indicates.
dashed line is the dashed line is the signboard projecting some cornice type signboard, and then over at the Get Cafe, it's the existing marquee, I guess.
But there's a line that kind of bisects the door there, that thin line across the street. So that